Is that how you say it? Ciguatera, actually?
Yeah, Ciguatera.
Ciguatera, yeah.
Different pronunciation.
But then, so there's been people going back and forth saying, no, you don't, yes, you can. From what I've heard is that if you eat it raw, you might be able to, but as long as it's cooked, you're fine. And you guys have been doing some studies on this. What is the bottom line on that?
Yeah, so, we've had this problem with the Indo-Pacific lionfish that's invaded the Caribbean, and it was first reported back in the 90s in Florida, and since that point, it's spread around the entire Caribbean. And, normally you get these introduced species from other areas, and they kind of fade out, or they remain these small populations. This guy, the lionfish, happens to be a voracious predator, and it'll eat anything. It'll eat itself to the point that it actually has fatty liver syndrome, because all these prey that are these little, these little fishes that are running around the reef, that are the babies of the bigger fish or the crabs and things. They're totally unused to this predator and the way it hunts, and so they just get nailed. And so it's consuming massive amounts of prey on the reef. And there's a lot of concern around the Caribbean that among all the other insults to coral reefs in the Caribbean, that now we have this predator that's removing all the valuable fish on the reef that perform all these functions, like cleaning off algae and keeping the coral healthy. And so they're really worried about this.
Well, also, if they're eating all the juvenile fish, or most of them, then those are fish that are never going to grow up to be bigger fish to complete the cycle.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that's the big problem. And so the one way that people thought, okay, we can control this, is it turns out, lionfish is delicious.
It is. I think it's one of the best white fish that you can eat, honestly. It's light, it's not a fishy taste to it, and it's not farm raised like tilapia. So,
yeah, exactly.
But then you have to worry about the Ciguatera part of it, which is something you have to worry about with a lot of predator fish here in the Caribbean already, and that's where people are getting confused. Which fish is safe to eat? How do you tell? Is the lionfish going to be a really big problem with having this poison in them? So how do we tell? I mean, where do we go from there?
Yeah, and so that's where the collaborative research I've been involved with comes into play. We've been conducting a study on the Ciguatera itself, not just in lionfish, but Ciguatera on the south coast of St. Thomas, St. John for the last 8 years. We've been very, very interested in understanding how the toxin, which is produced by a tiny little microalgae that grows all over the coral reef, how the toxin in that algae, when it gets grazed by parrotfishes, and then those get eaten by larger fishes, and those finally get eaten by a barracuda or a lionfish, how those toxins, which become the ciguatoxins, end up, poisoning humans and becoming a health risk. So which reefs are hot, which reefs are not. So we're really interested, I'm trying to understand the whole ecology of this sickness. And it turns out that, because it was a natural question with lionfish invading, we know that they're a predator. They're going to be eating a lot of little fishes that might have little bits of toxin. They're going to be accumulating that toxin, and then they have to eat so many fish just to maintain their own body, many, many more times their body weight, that they call, it's called biomagnification, where the toxin actually builds up over time and you get higher concentrations.
This is one of those rare toxins that does this. Not a lot of stuff that actually builds up over a period of time and then hits you at once. It's not like you can eat one fish and feel it, which I've been told you can, depending on the size of the fish. Yeah. But it also depends on how much fish you've eaten with the toxin in it.
It's true, yeah. But it's just a really, really weird toxin. It's one of the most potent toxins known to man. And it's potent in extremely, extremely small amounts, which is good because usually you only get extremely small amounts. It's not usually fatal, but it can be very debilitating. It's very uncomfortable. So that's the bad news, is that Ciguatera is here. So our natural question was, okay, do the lionfish have this? And it turns out because that ciguatoxin is so potent in such small quantities, it's not something you can test for on the dock. The collaborators I work with at the Food and Drug Administration in Alabama, they have to run, instruments that are the size of, a large schoolroom just to look at the toxins themselves and understand them. And not only that, but the standard which they compare against, the purified Caribbean ciguatoxin that they have, is one of the most valuable substances on Earth, because it takes about 1,000, 2,000 pounds of barracuda to make something that's the size of a head of a pin of that toxin. They have to grind it all down just to get that bit of toxin. So it's very, very valuable. So we, undertook this project to understand, do the lionfish have toxins? And so the answer is, and you might expect this from St. Thomas and St. John, which is an area that's considered
hot zone
in the Caribbean, that yes, they do have ciguatoxins. And the ciguatoxin levels are roughly what you might find in a schoolmaster snapper. So it's about 12% of the fish had toxins. And these were all fish mostly that came from the south side of St. Thomas, which is an area that can be hotter for Ciguatera. St. Croix is not known to be hot, and the north side of St. Thomas is not known to be as hot.
See, there's always like the rumor going around that the closer you are to the equator, the hotter the water is, the more Ciguatera you're going to have, and that's why if you're going into your local fishermen, you ask them, where'd you catch this fish, South Drop or the North Drop?
Yeah.
Do you stay away from the stuff off the South Drop? But
Yeah,
St. Croix is not a hot zone, and they're further south than we are.
Exactly, yeah, and it may have to do with more with water turbulence, you know, that these little microalgae can't build up where there's lots of wave action. St. Croix is pretty exposed coast. The north side, we know the north swell is pretty exposed. So it might just be a question of they're not able to build up, and so the north side and St. Croix tend to be safer, whereas the calm south side of St. Thomas, St. John can build these populations, and it's a little bit warmer because the current flows, you know, a little less than the north side. It's not the Atlantic water. So but that's part of what we're trying to figure out with this project. And so what we did find out with the lionfish, so that the bad news is that they have it, but the good news is that it's like a schoolmaster snapper, and that's something that people do eat in the Virgin Islands. It's just something you take a little more care with. So you want to get it from a fisherman who's taking it from an area that's not known to be, you know, a Ciguatera hotspot. And I should preface all this by saying that no one, to my knowledge, in the Caribbean has been sickened with Ciguatera from eating lionfish. So, you know, the risk may be a little overblown. Because I was working with the Food and Drug Administration, we had to test it. We had to make an evaluation of this fish because people are going to be consuming it, and it's their responsibility to make sure American consumers are safe when they're eating.
But there's still no way that we can test it on the dock yet. There's no way we can get a little chemical and see if there's, like, you know, I don't know, obviously...
Yeah, you just said they have to have this, it takes a schoolroom full of stuff to test that.
Well, to get the purified toxin to be able to use as a test structure, but can you take a piece of fish that you caught and test it to know if it's safe to eat?
Yeah, they did develop one in, I think in Japan, or maybe it was Hawaii. They did develop a test. The problem was it was $30 per test, which is more valuable often than the fish you're testing, and it was only 50% effective in detecting it, which is almost like flipping
Why
a
even
coin.
test it? Yeah,
exactly.
Well, if you cook it, does it cook out?
No, that's one of the other things. It's totally heat stable. You can freeze it, you can cook it, you can, you know, blow it up with a nuclear bomb. The stuff is still there. It's just this crazy toxin that just sits there, and you can't get rid of it. To my knowledge, you can't leach it out of the fish. It's just something you have to use best practices to avoid getting the fish that might have it.
So it's like a water bear. You ever seen that little microbe?
Oh, yeah, the tardigrades, yeah.
Yeah, that's like completely indestructible, can be in 1,000-degree temperatures, can live out in space, and all this stuff. So we have another organism that here on the planet that's indestructible. Great. I don't feel any better after this conversation.
We have radioactive microbes and fish on the Pacific. We got Ciguatera in the Atlantic. Vegetarian. See that banana? There you go. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
You know, but people have been living with Ciguatera ever since they've been fishing in the ocean. And in many areas, and we're lucky in the Caribbean, in the Pacific ciguatoxin is often considered much worse. There's even been a suggestion that some of the Polynesian cruises across the Pacific were stimulated because they were living in islands that became hot. With Ciguatera, they no longer could consume the local fish, and so they set out on these long voyages to find other islands.
Back in the day.
Yeah. Way back in the day. And so, in here, it's been known, you know, at least it's been recorded since the 17th century, where sailing ships came into harbor, and the crew couldn't even drop the anchor because they were all so afflicted by they all ate one barracuda or something from the waters.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been around.
It's interesting stuff, you know, and we don't go super long here without music, so we've already gone like about 10 minutes chatting. I'd love to have you back up. There's so many things so many questions, really, not only about Ciguatera and lionfish, but just about the environment here and what we can all do to keep the reefs healthy and stuff. Is there a website? Do you guys have like a public forum where people, if they want to just themselves get some more information, is there a place that they can go to find some of these studies that you've been doing? Or
it's Ciguahab, Ciguahab.com. I think it is .com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of information there about our project you can find. You can also look me up at UVI's website. I'm a professor down there in the Marine Science Department, so it's Tyler Smith. And you can email me at tsmith@uvi.edu if you have any other questions, and I can get you information or send you to the person who has that information.
All right, Tyler. Well, thank you so much for coming up today, and it's very enlightening, very something that we should all know about. And I actually didn't know Ciguatera has been around that long. I didn't know that. I thought it was semi-new, but
yeah.
Nice. Good stuff, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
He's more liquor than man. Good morning.